Welcome to the channel. My name is Saul, the creator of the Summoner's Nexus TCG, an indie digital trading card game that will be with you hopefully relatively soon. And in the lead up to its release, I wanted to start sharing some of the things that have gone into making it over this 3+ years. Yeah, I know, I've been working on this game for over 3 years. If you're interested in digital trading card games or just trading card games in general, or you just like the idea of watching the development of a project until it reaches its conclusion, subscribe so you can keep up to date on what's going on with the project. Join our Discord community down below to find like-minded people or to find people to play against, and like the video so that more people can see it. Thank you very much. So when talking about decks in the Summoner's Nexus TCG, you have major subsets and minor subsets. Minor subsets exist to sort of fill the gaps in with the major subsets that exist in the game, and to make it so that you have more deck building options and variety. So the Harpy subset is what we're looking at today, and this is, well, it's one of the most interesting minor subsets, while also being arguably the most useless. Now, the obvious theme here is a group of harpies that control the weather, and so when coming up with their effects, the idea again was control. Now, I had an asset. The game was initially going to be a 3D project, and so there was an asset that was broken down into like different elemental variations of a harpy, and so I used that as the basis for the idea for this subset, and then I just sort of changed the designs. Now, when it comes to the creation of this deck, I was very hesitant. Now, I've already said that minor subsets exist to fill in the gaps for major ones, so they are, I guess, to this game what Staples might be to Yu-Gi-Oh! Again, as the meta of the game like evolves and it gains more, or rather as the culture of the game evolves, that will become clearer. But it's sort of like, okay, you can splash these into various strategies. Now, because the theme for this deck was control, I gave this deck a series of effects that I was very scared of, and that is the ability to manipulate your opponent's life point gauge directly. Now, life points in this game, it's called your Nexus gauge, and it is the most important resource in the game. You use it to summon out your monsters by paying a cost, and it is what literally keeps you alive. So if it reaches 0, you lose the game. Now, with that being the case, any effect that was going to directly interact with the Nexus gauge, in my mind, just needed to be heavily monitored. So I was very cautious when creating this deck because I knew that it had the potential to be broken, and I may have watched it too hard because they suck. Okay, suck is a strong word. They're not really, in my opinion, they're not the most viable deck in the game currently, but I am fully confident that I don't need to make a change to them because they are a needle's breath away from becoming very viable and very good potentially, in my opinion. And the reason for that is the way that I balance these effects is, in order to destroy, or in order to manipulate your opponent's life points, these cards either have to 1, destroy a monster on the field, or 2, attack your opponent directly, and all of them have 50 attack and 50 defense, which means they are almost never going to be able to destroy something else on the field. That would be very rare. Attacking your opponent directly is something that's possible, but the cards that affect your opponent's life points when attacking directly just have the effect of doubling the damage done, which is just 100 damage, which is not out of the realm of what's normal for this game, and so they are balanced around having low stats. The reason why I am confident that that will not be a hindrance for long is that there are already so many cards in the game that can boost the stats of cards you control. So all you need is a card that boosts your stats. Like, for example, there's a card in this game called Golgotha already, which has the ability... Oh wait, I did the filter wrong. I need to take this off first. So there's a card in this game called Golgotha that has the ability to send itself to the graveyard and then give its stats to any card on the field, which means that if she is at 100 points of attack and defense, that's assuming that you didn't do anything else to boost this card, she can then transfer that attack. She can transfer whatever her attack stat is to a different card. So let's say she transferred it to the card that needs to attack directly and then doubles the damage. Well, that 100 attack, you know, multiplication thing that it does has now just turned into a 300 attack multiplication, because 150 on 150 would be even stronger, and all of the cards sort of have that upward potential, I would say. So anything that comes out that boosts the attack of cards or makes it more viable for cards to be able to attack inherently just makes this a more powerful contender in the metagame, and that's just one way that this deck could be piloted. My thought process when making it was like, okay, you can it'll be a backwards compatible thing where as more cards come out that boost attack, it'll become better, but also in strategies where you have very strong attackers, how it works in this game is that the strongest cards on the field always attack first. So if you have a deck where, like the Reaper subset for example, where they are able to clear your opponent's defenses, well, these cards will always be able to guarantee their direct attack. They won't be able to proc their effects that are activated by destroying your opponent's cards, but there's some give and take. So I was thinking about the ways where they would be compatible with the current meta and the future meta to come. Now, it also doesn't hurt that they have some of the most beautiful designs in the game. They are one of my favorite subsets in terms of their art direction, and I use them for various promotional pieces of material. Not even in like a weird, like, oh, waifus kind of way. Like this is just a beautiful image to me. Like, this is just serene, and a lot of them are just like that, where it's like, okay, this just looks really, really cool, in my opinion anyway. So that's another thing that I like about them. Now, another thing that I wanted to give this deck is, with the fact that they're all so weak and it's rare that they get to use their other effects, I gave them sort of a pylon ability where they, when destroyed, have the ability to summon other harpies to take their place, which is supposed to be a way of saying like, okay, yes, a 50 attack harpy might not be a lot to deal with, but what if it's 50 and then another 50 and then another 50? And so it's that board presence that they really currently bring to the table, because, for example, let's say your opponent attacks you directly, or wants to attack you directly. Well, your opponent attacks into one of the Harpy monsters, it gets destroyed. That first card's attack ends, because there's a thing called the chain of momentum, where if a card attacks, it has to attack everything that exists on the field currently, and then the next card will then be able to attack you directly. But what this card will do is, it gets destroyed, your opponent's first card's attack ends, and then this card's effect will summon another card to take its place, which means that it can block the second attack as well. At least that's how it currently works. Which I think actually has some solid defensive potential. I think that could be really, really cool, potentially. It hasn't proven to be viable yet, but maybe the right person with the right mind hasn't just come along yet to like break it. So again, it's a deck that I feel like has a lot of potential, but it's one that I am ready to buff if the need arises, because I can admit I was very harsh with the restrictions that this deck currently has. Another way that I feel like I've tried to make them usable is they've got a very low set of synergy ratings, right? Their synergy ratings are, I think, 3 across the board, except for one that has a synergy rating of 4. So you can fit, even though there's 5 of them, you can just choose the 3 that you like the best and fit them into whatever strategy you really want, which is another thing that is really good that not a lot of decks have. Like with most minor subsets, they'll have a synergy rating of 3, but there's 3 of them, right? Whereas with this, you actually get to pick and choose the effects that you want, which again gives the player a lot more deck building variety, because that's what I wanted to achieve with the minor subsets. So this is one of the minor subsets that really, really drives that point across, where it's like, yes, we have the synergy system, but you still get to choose what goes into your deck. And I can't wait for more decks to have more cards than what their synergy rating like cap is, because then you'll start to see even more variety in the deck building. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's relevant about this deck to really share in terms of their design. I've talked about their attack, I've talked about some of the difficulties when it came to balancing them and why they've been balanced that way. One thing that's worth considering is the fact that their lore is done. It was done by a member of the community, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think that would be mentioned here. No, it wasn't mentioned here. So a member of the community helped to come up with the lore for it. So what I did was, in the early stages of development, I would give someone like a brief for what I want. Like I would come up with the story, write the points for it, and then hand it off to someone, because I was already I was writing the main story for the game and like various pieces of lore along with other projects and the actual development of the game. So I had people who were interested like volunteer for that. And so Gear Tomb, if I'm not mistaken, wrote this one, and I didn't necessarily like the approach of it at first, so I went back and forth with him. We tweaked it quite a bit until we got to what it finally ended up being, which is something that I find quite nice. It's more abstract than the other pieces of lore, where like normally you follow a specific character from the subset or a specific thing happens, and you kind of have that here to an extent, but it is more like, it's more about the setting than it is about any individual person, I feel like, which I think is a cool approach. So that's one more thing about the Harpy subset. This is a deck that I expect a lot of people to want to make work, because again, waifus, but it is just, it's just a fun deck. It's just a fun thing to I'm glad it exists. It's a fun thing to have in the game, even if I personally will probably never use this deck. Like, I'm probably I would rather just hit you over the head rather than strategizing on how to like whittle you down with effects and like, because yeah, that's a different type of play style. But it's the kind of thing where like I'm glad this is here. Anyway, that's everything from the Harpy subset. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like because it helps us out immensely, because the video gets sent out to more people, which means more potential players, which means more people for you to play against. I've been Saul. Have a wonderful day and take care, friends. Bye.